Welcome back, my friends, to AA Recovery Interviews. I'm your host, Howard L., and I'm an alcoholic. Sober since January 1st, 1988, one day at a time. I'm grateful you've joined us. AA Recovery Interviews is the podcast where Alcoholics Anonymous members from around the world share their timeless and extraordinary stories of experience, strength, and hope. With a little over 2 years sober, my guest, Jennifer S., had a rough journey getting to AA recovery. She was raised in a home where her mother's alcohol abuse was neatly ignored, while frequent family parties gave Jennifer ample opportunity to sample alcohol as a child. But it was the drinking she did as a teenager and young adult to cope with family dysfunction and escape reality that turned alcohol into a problem. Working as an attorney, Jennifer somehow managed to fully integrate drinking into her daily activities, with few consequences. She even managed to stay at home for several years to raise her 3 children, but alcoholism had inconspicuously followed Jennifer into parenthood. After divorcing her first husband for infidelity, Jennifer's drinking ramped up beyond its previous effectiveness at quelling her inner turmoil. Finally, she had had enough and made the decision to get sober. She returned to the rooms of AA with a beaten spirit but a willing heart, and has been sober since. In AA, Jennifer found a sponsor and started working the steps in earnest. She found herself being lovingly drawn to the center of the program, where she found spiritual solutions. She fulfilled service commitments and modeled behavior that has inspired other women to do the work and enjoy recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was at Jennifer's first meeting at the AA club we both attend. I followed her progress in becoming a sober woman on whom others can depend. Given her 2 years of recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous, Jennifer's message will be of immediate value to those in their first days, weeks, or months. Her fresh message of hope will also ring true for those AA members whose sobriety dates are further in the past. But whether you're a newcomer or an old-timer, I'm certain you'll enjoy the next hour of AA Recovery Interviews with my friend and AA sister, Jennifer S.
My name is Jennifer, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Jennifer. I appreciate you joining me today on the AA Recovery Interviews podcast. It's something that I know you've been looking forward to for the last couple of years, as have I.
I have. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well into your first year of sobriety, you asked when you could be on the podcast. And some people have asked me that over the years, and I've been doing this for the last 4.5 years now. And I set a minimum of 2 years of sobriety. And I remember the day I said to you, if you can get to 2 years, then we'll do the interview. And here you are, you just celebrated
2 years.
2 years. What date was that? What year did you get sober?
I got sober March 9th of 23. I just had a birthday.
Was that the very first time you ever tried to get sober?
No. I began actively trying to get sober in June of 22. I had bounced around the rooms before that. I had a sense that maybe I had a problem, but it wasn't until 22 that I was pretty convinced. I come from a big family. One of my brothers passed away from a cocaine overdose in March of 22. Mm-hmm. That was my second brother to die from this disease. And it occurred to me then that maybe what I had was a lot more serious than I realized. And although I didn't do cocaine, I drank, and I drank way too much. And so I decided Mother's Day of 22, my kids, in my mind, had been mean to me. They didn't, take me out to dinner and celebrate me and buy me flowers. And so I stayed in bed all day, clutching a bottle of vodka, drinking and passing out. And at some point, I reached out to my siblings and my spouse and said, I think I'm in trouble. I think I need to go inpatient. And that started a wave, I guess, that I couldn't stop. Like once I came to, I thought, what did I do? I don't really want to go to treatment, but it was too late. So in June of 22, I went to treatment.
So Mother's Day of 22, you're sitting there feeling sorry for yourself with a bottle of vodka.
Yep.
But something told you that you needed to do something. What was that feeling?
I think it was the little sane person that lived inside me, despite the fact that the insane person was in the driver's seat. I think it was a little tiny drive for survival. That's how I view it. Maybe it was the voice of God, I don't know. But it was something, and I understood in that moment of complete drunkenness that I was in trouble and I needed help. So I was shipped off to detox and then to treatment.
And that was in 22.
Correct.
So how soon after Mother's Day did you do that?
Very quickly. I went to detox at the end of May, and they kept me there for about 6 days. And then it bleeds together. I don't even know exactly when in June I landed in rehab, but they took me directly from the detox to the rehab. And I was in rehab for, I think 30 days, 35 days. That was the first time I had 35 days without alcohol in probably since I started drinking.
What kind of volume are we talking about here? How much were you drinking every day?
I was drinking about 13 to 15 double shots of vodka a day. Yeah. I don't know if that was every day. Some days I would drink 13 to 15 airplane bottles of vodka, and I'll tell you, that's not a double. That's just a regular old shot. So some days it was less, but it was, I'm 5'2". It was way too much for me.
You mentioned about feeling sorry for yourself, being in bed with a bottle of vodka. Why wasn't anybody interested in doing anything for you that day?
Oh, well, I think that they were. I had kept my drinking a secret as much as possible.
Really?
I had gotten to where I hid it around the house. Most days I was not staying at home in bed. I was going to work, and it would appear from the outside that I was a functional person. I wasn't. This is the very end of my drinking. It didn't start that way. It started much more innocently than that.
Yeah, it usually does.
Yeah.
So we're talking about going back to your earlier life when you first drank. You remember your childhood with regard to drinking that was going on around you. You mentioned a couple of siblings who ended up dying.
Yes.
What was going on in your family of origin that might have predicted that you would end up as an alcoholic?
Well, my mother was an alcoholic. Now, she was much more functional than me. She kept her drinking to weekends. But when she drank too much. But she was a gregarious, kind drunk, unlike me, who I'm a Jekyll and Hyde, apparently. My mother was Venezuelan, and my father was American. They met in Venezuela. When they moved to the States, she kept a lot of the same traditions and spirit that she had over there. I remember having parties at least twice a month. She was very entrenched in the Venezuelan community, and people would come over, and we'd eat dinner at 10 o'clock at night and then push all the furniture back and everyone would dance in the living room, and there's plenty of food and alcohol flowing all the time.
And this is when you're a little kid?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Little kid all the way through to high school. So my friends and I, if you wanted to drink at somebody's house, you came to my house.
So your house was party central?
It was, but not understand, my father was a normie and he worked. I had 4 brothers and a sister, and there were certain expectations, about grades. We all became educated people. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she kept a very nice house. You would not have known from the outside looking in all the trouble that was brewing.
Did your mom ever admit the fact that she was abusing alcohol or an alcoholic?
Absolutely not. She was in total 100% denial.
So the perception you have of her as a drunk is really kind of based on her behavior while you were growing up.
Yeah, so when she would drink at parties, she would drink too much. She would usually go too far and exhibit drunkenness, and it would upset me and my siblings at times. At other times, we didn't care. And it was only later, and especially now, reflecting on it, I see that she had this thing. She never descended to the depths of dysfunction that I did.
So did she ever try to get sober or cut down or anything?
No, if we said, hey, you drank too much last night, she would say, no, I didn't. And there was one time where she ran into a wall and fell backward onto her head and she had to get stitches. She said, somebody put something in my drink. She was completely in denial.
So she was oblivious to the fact that she was overusing and abusing alcohol, and would not label herself an alcoholic because she didn't think she had a problem.
Absolutely.
Huh, that's interesting. Now, where are you in the order of kids?
I'm the 6th. I'm the youngest by many years.
So what's the difference between you and your next oldest sibling?
10 years.
When I was a kid, my older brother was 8 years older than I. So I never, by the time I was old enough that he would have anything to do with me, he was already almost on the point of leaving home.
Sure.
So I never really knew him growing up. What was your relationship like with your siblings growing up?
I had a great relationship with my siblings, actually. They were all out of the house by the time I was 9. So in some aspects, it was like I was an only child, but at the same time, they were all like pseudo-parents. I used to go out, especially with the sibling who's 10 years older. He and I used to go out and like party together. He was friends with some of my friends. I was always friends with his girlfriends. And my sister and I have always been very close. Now, she's a normie, so I couldn't get her to drink with me or anything like that, but she was always around. If I got in fights with my mom, she was the person I called and that sort of thing. So very close-knit, like, I don't know if you have a lot of experience with Hispanic families, but they culturally the family is the most important thing. We had to go to Sunday barbecues at my parents' house every Sunday. And if we didn't go, and this is after we've moved out, we're all adults and married and that sort of thing. If we didn't go, there was tremendous guilt laid on us.
Yeah, I married into one of those families.
You did?
Yeah, my wife's mother is from Monterrey, Mexico,
Okay.
and most of her relatives, they grew up in Mexico, and some of them moved here. But
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. There's such a broad social life, especially when her mother's house was kind of the hub of activity for Thanksgiving and anything else. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's very much what my house was like. And I'll say that my mom, because she was Catholic, was very focused on me not getting pregnant. And so all of her energy went towards that, and she was more permissive in other areas like drinking.
So you can drink as long as you don't get pregnant.
That's right.
No telling what happens when you get drunk and then get pregnant. Right?
Well, yeah, thank God I never had to find out.
Yeah, thank God for that. Mm-hmm. So as I've observed in my own extended family, especially on my wife's side, the little kids would run around and find glasses of half-drank booze or beer or something, and they would take sips. Is that what happened for you too?
I did. So my mom would drink scotch on the rocks. And when she would leave her glass sitting somewhere, I would eat all the ice because I liked the way it tasted. And I don't recall getting drunk or even tipsy, but I remember really, really liking the taste.
So you had older siblings who were already drinking and using drugs by the time you were old enough to know it?
By the time I was a teenager, I was well aware that my older siblings drank, with the exception of 2 of them who are still with us and who are normies. I became aware of the drug use because I was shielded from it, I'll put it that way. They never did it in front of me. And my parents tried to spare me the knowledge, but as their drug use got worse and worse and horrible things happened, it was impossible to keep it from me anymore. So I've never tried cocaine in my life, and the reason is because my brothers were cocaine addicts.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how their behavior influenced yours early on. Did it make you want to do it or make you want to stay away from doing it?
It's a good question. I think seeing my older siblings and my mother drink at parties made me want to drink. It looked like drinking is a way that you have fun. But I had the opposite reaction with cocaine. I saw the absolute despair that it caused my parents, and I never wanted to. I had a sense that if I tried it, I'd probably fall in love like they had, and I never wanted to put my family through what I saw my parents go through. I mean, they aged 20 years and 5, and it just, rehabs and car accidents and hospitalizations, and just, I could go on and on.
So there's an acceleration to the bottom that's much greater with cocaine than alcohol.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I'm alive today because cocaine wasn't my drug of choice.
You mentioned 2 of your siblings have died of this disease.
Yes.
Do you have any sense of the amount of time it took them from when they first started till their actual deaths?
Yeah, so I would say that my older brother, Jeff, from what I understand, he had a 25 or 30-year cocaine addiction. I believe he started doing it in college, and he died when he was Oh gosh, I think he was 54. And then my other brother, started later after law school. I think he'd been practicing law like 10 years when he became addicted. And he also died in his 50s. So his was a little shorter span. Now, he had a heart murmur, which is, I think, can speed things up. It's not a good idea to have a heart murmur and do cocaine. So,
Would you mind me asking you what they would have listed as the cause of death for your brothers?
they both were. Jeff was cocaine and alcohol. There's some chemical that's created when you mix cocaine and alcohol. It's some third chemical and so I think his official cause of death was from the combination of the two. I forget how it was worded. And then my other brother was heart attack, but it was related to cocaine intoxication.
That's really sad.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah.
It's a real shame.
To what extent did your folks try and influence their behavior? When they knew what was going on, how did your folks approach it?
My mother was an enabler. When we had parties, she would encourage, this is going to make her sound awful, there was no malice in it. She would encourage them to drink alcohol because she thought if they drank, then they wouldn't do cocaine. So as long as they were feeling like a little buzz, then that would be good enough, and they wouldn't need the cocaine. Well, obviously the opposite is true. And they would have found the cocaine with or without her encouraging them to drink. But that was sort of her strange logic. My dad, I mean, he was there and he paid for the rehabs, and I think at the end he wanted to incorporate some tough love, and my mom was not willing to do that. I will say my parents predeceased my brothers, thank God. So they didn't have to suffer through that.
Well, it sounds like a really tumultuous type of family dynamic going on.
It was both idyllic and tumultuous.
In what ways was it idyllic?
Well, my parents were married for 51 years. You know, we lived in a big house in the suburbs. They educated all six of us, undergraduate, and I graduated from law school with no college debt. So they were very focused on us. Everything they earned went towards us and educating us. And they were involved in my life, and they loved us, and we knew it. The problem was my mother had the personality of most alcoholics. She's very narcissistic without realizing it. And, you know, the drug use with my brothers that happened later when I became aware of it as a teenager, it dragged our family through the mud. I mean, it was always this looming fear that we're going to get a call, you know, that they're dead. And ultimately it happened.
Let's back up a second and just ask, how did you cope with what was going on in your family of origin when you were a kid, let's say before you turned to booze?
You know, like I said initially, I was shielded from a lot of that stuff. I was very self-centered. I had my own group of friends, and I had extracurricular activities I was a part of, and just sort of focused on me, honestly. And as I got older and it became more apparent, I gradually started to cope with alcohol. But that happened later. And I can't see a clear point exactly when that happened. Well, actually, probably when my mother died in 2007. That's when things got really bad. Between 2007 and 22, it was a gradual march to complete and total dysfunction.
Yeah. The reason I asked that question was it seems like some people start drinking to cope with the things that they can no longer cope with.
Sure.
Using the mechanisms that they had growing up as children or maybe even as adolescents. The drugs and or alcohol, for me, were my way of being able to get through a lot of what dysfunction was going on in the limited number of years I was still living at home. And then afterwards, it was for pure pleasure and enjoyment.
I see what you're saying. For me, it was, initially I began drinking because it gave me an escape from me. I wasn't so concerned with what was happening at home. What was happening at home was fairly easy for me to deal with. I don't think I understood the magnitude of the problem for a while. But I felt very withdrawn and introverted and shy, and I found that when I drank, I was the opposite of all of those things. And so it did something for me, and that was totally addicting. I loved it.
Were you naturally that way when you were a kid, introverted and shy?
Yes, I came out of the womb like that. I came out of the womb not crying, apparently.
So by the time you started drinking for effect, let's say, to cope with the way you were feeling about yourself,
Yep.
you were already, what, a late teenager, early 20s? When did you start?
It's hard to say. I liked the way it made me feel, and I drank to escape myself beginning at probably age 15, but I kept it confined to weekends. And occasionally a Thursday night, or, that would be an anomaly. I would say around 2007, when my mother passed, I started drinking to cope, and it would creep outside of the norm. It wasn't day drinking during the workday, but it started to become medicinal as opposed to something I would do with people like in a convivial sort of setting. I would turn up a bottle of vodka just to not care, at home alone, just to take the uncomfortable edge off.
And it worked for a while, I take it.
It did. Yeah, it worked magically. And I have a strange reaction to alcohol. The first few drinks, it has an amphetamine-like effect on me. And I can do things like clean the whole house. And so I would do that. I'd get a little jolt, clean the house, feel a little better. And I could pretty much stop. Like, I didn't keep on drinking until I passed out or got in a fight with my husband. I could handle it a little bit better back then. And then one day I couldn't.
How noticeable was it to the people around you that you were drinking and or getting drunk when you drank and or having hangovers? What sort of things were they noticing?
Well, since I started drinking at 15 with my friends, I was always the one who got drunk and got too drunk. And I always, every weekend I had a hangover. I mean, that just was what you did. And I was always the one who took it too far. I drank differently from other people from go. But are you asking when did it become, like when did people become concerned?
Yeah, concerned, or let's say initially they're aware of it, and then that awareness kind of turns to concern. And sometimes that concern will turn to them actually saying something or taking action.
Yeah.
What did that progression look like for you?
Well, back when I was in college, my sister told me that she thought I drank too much. And I thought that she was crazy and that I was a college drunk, just like all my friends were college drunks.
And this is your sister who doesn't drink?
That's correct. I mean, she'll drink a Corona Light and then she won't drink anymore. But it was mostly her and my father. They both mentioned that they thought I drank too much. And so I didn't pay any mind to that. And then when I became an adult and had children, and still would drink too much in the presence of the children at family events, for example, then more people began to get concerned because I wasn't, it was like I was still a teenager, despite the fact that I was in my 30s and responsible for little people. And something happened, my development got arrested. It's just strange to me. Here's the other thing, I associated myself with people who drank like me, or almost like me. Maybe not quite like me, but they like to drink almost as much as I do. They just were able to not go as far as I did. And so I didn't seem that out of the ordinary, certainly not to myself. I would have to ask people, when did you really know that I had a problem? And it's probably a lot sooner than I think it was.
Sometimes people won't say anything about it, especially if you're functioning well around other areas of your life.
That's exactly right.
You sound very much to me like a functional alcoholic. Would you label yourself that?
I would say I was a functional alcoholic until the very end.
Till the very end.
Yeah, I would say the last year I was functioning, and Howard, I don't know how. So I guess I was a functional alcoholic. I still had a job. I didn't get fired. I didn't go to jail. I didn't, there's a lot of things that could have happened that didn't happen.
Lots of reasons why you're not an alcoholic. If you can do all that stuff, if you can accomplish all that, if you can raise a family, if you can stay in a marriage, if you can keep from crashing your car every week, how could you possibly be an alcoholic? Alcoholics do that stuff, not me.
That's right. Now, towards the end, I did lose a marriage. I did lose my first marriage. But towards the end, there was a spiral of absurd things that happened, including crashing a car, going to the psych ward. I could go on and on.
Those happened within a relatively short period of time. Right.
Correct. The universe had a target on my back, is what I would have told you. It had nothing to do with drinking.
Yeah, and that's something how we rationalize, why we're drinking and why it's okay for us to drink and why it's somebody else's fault that they think we have a problem.
Absolutely.
That's your problem. If you think I have a problem, you've got the problem. I remember telling that to my wife
Yep.
before I stopped drinking when I said, I don't have a problem, your dad has a problem, because her father was a falling down drunk.
Yeah.
But who was in AA for a while but could never really stay sober and died in a kind of a horrible alcoholic death.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
But yeah, at the being able to function and not get fired and not have all the negative consequences almost acts to exonerate our behavior or whatever we're doing that would indicate we have a problem that we should take care of.
I 100% agree, and I think it's the reason that cocaine killed my brothers, because they were able to keep all the balls in the air for the most part.
Isn't that something?
Yep.
You mentioned your first marriage. How did alcohol affect that in the early days and then throughout the marriage to the point at which you did divorce?
Yeah, I would say that alcohol destroyed my marriage. So when we got married in 2004, and at that time we drank together. The trouble it would cause me is maybe once every 6 months we'd have a blow up because I would drink too much and I became a different person, a mean person. Apparently, I'm a blackout drunk, so I don't really remember it. But apparently I say very awful mean things when I drink, like I want a divorce and I hate you. And so that went on for years. And I think the span between times that happened got smaller and smaller. And so I was drinking, probably not more often, but when I drank, I was drinking more and more and more. And those blow-ups were happening more frequently. And I think where he finally had enough was when the kids became old enough that they knew I was drunk. And when we would fight, it was very upsetting to them. We didn't get in physical fights. And when I say fights, I'm the one fighting. He's not really fighting back. But that just kind of that was it.
Now, when you fought, was he bringing up the fact that you were acting the way that you were, maybe because of the alcohol and the fact that you were drunk?
It's a great question. The next day, I'd be in big trouble. I'd wake up and know something happened and I'm in trouble. And he would get mad that I had behaved the way that I did. But what he said is, why can't you just have one or two? Why do you keep drinking? Part of the story is he's a heavy drinker himself, possibly an alcoholic, and I don't think he was willing to give up his own drinking, which is me getting sober would have shone the light on him.
How many children do you have?
3.
When you were married in the early days and when you got pregnant, did you do anything with your drinking to like stop during the pregnancies?
It was no problem to stop. I stopped drinking. So I had friends that would have like a glass of wine while they were pregnant. I never had even a sip of alcohol while pregnant or while nursing. It hadn't progressed far enough that it was even a problem.
Did you notice it making a difference, though, in your relationship with your husband, the periods of time that you weren't drinking? Or were those just replaced with the feelings of being pregnant?
It's a good question. You know, I had antepartum depression, which is pre-baby. I mean, when the baby's still inside you, depression. And so our relationship wasn't volatile. We didn't fight, but I was very focused on how bad I was feeling and how I don't know that our relationship was any better when I wasn't drinking. I was a very selfish person, Howard. The alcohol was just one manifestation of that.
You must have been pretty miserable, feeling physically ill, but not being able to drink.
I very much missed drinking. Yeah. But I missed more at that point, like the fun of being able to go out. And, you know, I got pregnant at 29. And to me, it was still, my friends were all still doing the same stuff we'd done in college. So it was an adjustment. But I wasn't at that point yet where I drank to make myself feel better often enough. I mean, it hadn't gotten there yet. That would come a little bit later.
What's the spacing between the 3 kids?
My daughter's 18, my middle child is 16, and his brother's 15. So they were right in a row.
Wow, so that's a lot to handle in a very short period of time.
It is, and my mother died when my daughter was 9 months old, so I became a motherless mother. And my sister, who's always been there for me, didn't have children of her own, and so I didn't really have the advice or the help of a mother figure. My husband's mother had died right before we even found out we were pregnant, so we were sort of alone, floating out there without help.
What were the early years of their childhood like with regard to your drinking and the things that were going on in your marriage? How was that affecting the family overall and the children specifically?
Well, I think early on they would be in bed when the fireworks would start.
Uh-huh.
And as they got a little older, I can remember my daughter around 6 or 7 saying, "You're acting weird." It was gradual, and I guess I thought because I wasn't verbally or physically abusing them that I wasn't doing anything wrong. And now, in looking back on it, I was emotionally unavailable to them, and they could feel it. There was a wall because I wasn't there. And I think that had a profound impact on them. And I would like to minimize the impact my drinking had on them, but I can't. I think it was not good. I do think that things a mother does, generally, not in all cases, are more harmful than the things that a father does. I mean, I was their emotional support system, and then suddenly I was unavailable at times, and that must have been very difficult for them. And then when I went through the divorce, I did a nosedive into alcoholism and truly abandoned them.
Yeah. How old were they when you got the divorce?
My daughter was 13, and the boys were 11 and 10.
That's a tough age to get divorced, isn't it?
Yeah, couldn't have been worse. Could not have been worse.
Had things just progressed to the point that it had to happen then, or something dire was going to happen? What was there that precipitated that particular point?
I put a tracker on his car and caught him cheating. He was in a motel in a different town. So I went to my office and drafted my own divorce petition and filed it that day. I was very proud of myself, never really considering the impact it would have on my kids, never really considering my part in causing the demise of the marriage. I just was so incensed and couldn't believe that this had happened. But obviously since I've gotten sober and doing this recovery thing, I see things more fully now.
I'm sure you do. I was curious as to what were your support systems at that point. Now you're in AA, you've got this entire community of people who are there for you, from the sponsor to the people in the program, to people in meetings, to people you can call.
Yeah.
What kind of support were you getting when all this was happening? And were you able to bounce anything off other people to get any sort of alternative point of view? What was that like?
That's a great question, and it hadn't even occurred to me. I had my siblings who did the best they could, I think, but who had their own lives. And I didn't have a support system. I didn't have anybody.
That's sad.
Yeah. I mean, I had some friends, but they had their own drama. Some of them were going through their own divorces, and I didn't have anybody. And so that's when I really amped up the drinking.
We'll be right back. My friends, if you're enjoying my AA Recovery Interviews podcast, check out my latest audiobook, Alcoholics Anonymous, the story of how more than 100 men have recovered from alcoholism. This is the word-for-word, cover-to-cover reading of the first printing of the first edition of the Big Book, published in 1939. It's a relaxing and meaningful way to listen to the Big Book anytime, any place. Have a free listen at Audible, Amazon, or iTunes. While you're there, enhance your program with another audiobook I produced, Lost Stories of the Big Book, 30 original stories missing from the third and fourth editions of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's an engaging audiobook that brings these stories to life for AA members who've never seen them. These timeless testimonials were originally cut to make room for newer stories in the third and fourth editions. But their vitally important messages of hope are as meaningful today as when they were first published. Many listeners will hear these stories for the very first time. Listen to a free sample of Lost Stories of the Big Book on Audible, Amazon, or iTunes. It's also available as a Kindle book or in paperback from Amazon if you'd like to read along. You're gonna love it. And we're back. So is it safe to say that alcohol forced you into some kind of isolation from others?
Absolutely.
Yeah. See, I think a lot of people don't realize that that's one of the most insidious ways that the disease gets to us. It imposes self-isolation on us in a way that is perfectly justifiable,
Right.
or perfectly rational. You know, I can't be with those people because they don't like my lifestyle or they're not into the same things I'm in. I used to stop hanging around with people if they didn't drink. If any of my friends stopped drinking, I would just not be friends with them anymore. There was no reason to be.
Oh, sure. I none of my friends ever stopped, but I would have. I would have stopped hanging out with them for sure.
So you drafted divorce papers. What kind of divorce was it? Was it nasty, quick?
Not at all. He's really a decent human, and we didn't have a lot to split. I just said, this is what I want, and he said, okay, and that's what we did.
So did you become a single mom at that point?
I did, and I was a single mom for a year.
And then what happened?
Well, so you want to know?
Sure.
I found out that the person that he'd been seeing was his college girlfriend. So I called up her husband, who was at that point her ex-husband, and said, hey, I just thought you should know our spouses were sleeping together, and they're still together. Because I wanted him to align with me to make the children hate them and make it hard for them to come around.
Wow.
Yeah. And so he and I became friends, and then 3 months later we got married. So.
Wow.
I met him in December of 20, and we got married in April of 21. So 4 months.
That's almost a soap opera.
It really is. It's kind of like a Lifetime movie or something.
So you were making decisions around all that time of the divorce and everything else. One of the things I've noticed about my own life and the way I've led it is that I made a lot of decisions while under the influence.
Yes.
That affected me for the rest of my life to this day. Things that I decided to do or not do were all pivotal moments that I just decided to let them slide. And as they slid, so did my life.
That's, Howard, that is me exactly. And so I contend, I try not to dwell in regret, but it's difficult because I made some very, very important lifelong decisions with the insane person at the wheel.
Yeah.
And, so now I'm just trying to chip away at the damage and fix it as best I can.
Yeah, and it sounds like, and you've dealt with a lot, and somehow you've managed to stay alive. Usually by this point you'd be saying, and you managed to stay sober all these years, but you've been sober for 2 years, so a lot of what's happened for you in your life is very recent. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to interview you, was because the recency effect. People will listen to the podcast thinking, oh, well, of course that guy's all right. He got 30 years.
Right,
Of course she's all right. She's been sober 12. But the shorter periods of sobriety, I think, are the hardest from the standpoint that it takes a while for people to believe just how earnest people are about getting sober.
Yeah.
You got full custody of the children?
Yes. I had a whole year of being completely single. And then within a year and 4 months, I was remarried. So my daughter was 14, almost 15. And the boys were 12 and 11.
So that was back in 2020?
2020. 2021 is when I got married. And I married an alcoholic. We were both, I guess in a way, sort of trauma bonded. And it was Katie by the door. We went absolutely crazy.
A lot of times what I've noticed is that people marry other people for the reason of trying to change the past.
Absolutely. The first time I married my father, and I created this little dysfunctional house just the way that, I had.
Yeah.
And then this time I married my mother. It's strange the things that we do.
Yeah, it is. So what was going on in that early part of March? There's a lot of time between when all this was going on with your divorces and everything else. You just continued to work and do your thing. I'm trying to zoom in on the chronology here.
Sure. I was a stay-at-home mom for several years. Yeah, I would say 7 or 8 years. When my daughter was in kindergarten through elementary school, I did not work at all. And then when it became clear to me that my marriage was in serious trouble, I went back to work part-time. And when I filed for divorce in 2019, they hired me full-time. Back then I took care of the kids. I did not drink during the day. I didn't not pick them up at practice. I was largely functioning. The problem would be on the weekends. And then it graduated to, I would say by 2021, I was in big trouble.
This is after you got remarried.
Correct.
To what extent was your first husband relating to the children or interacting with the children during child-raising part of their lives?
Oh, he was always very involved. And
Really?
oh, yeah. Coached their sports. We can argue about him being a husband, but he was an excellent father and is an excellent father.
So that's a good thing.
Yeah. And he absolutely swept in those last 2 years between 21 and 23 when I was just not doing it.
Things were falling apart at that point.
Things were falling apart. I mean, he could have taken the kids from me in a legal proceeding had he chosen to.
Was there ever a point at which you thought that was impending?
I knew it would happen if I didn't get sober. But he and I live in the same neighborhood about a mile from each other. So it was already at the point where the kids, we've never enforced the custody arrangement. They can stay wherever they want. And they had run for the hills at that point. They stayed almost primarily with their father so that they didn't have to be around me.
How did that make you feel at the time?
Very sorry for myself and very incensed that I had given, my working years and I'd stayed home with them and loved them and given them my time and then they chose him. That was how I looked at it. He cheated on me and they chose him. I know that sounds crazy. I could not see my part in it at that point.
How did you justify it to yourself?
I feel like shit. The universe has swindled me in so many ways, and this makes me feel like I'm not going to die. And so I'm going to do this. I don't hit them. I don't yell at them. I don't do anything. All I do is kind of like hide in my room. So why would anybody ask me not to?
I think we find ourselves acting out our parents as the kind of way we were parented. What you just described to me sounds like what you described to me about your mother earlier on.
Sure.
Hiding from that interaction. My mother was very emotionally absent, which made it doubly hard because my dad was verbally and physically abusive. And so you want a protector, you want somebody in the house to say what your father's doing is not right, but never had that satisfaction of a mother acknowledging the fact that what was going on was not normal.
Right.
And so you go through your life thinking that kind of behavior must be normal because I don't know any other way to think about it.
Sure.
You find that same sort of thing?
Absolutely. And I find that I still am confused on that. I still will tolerate certain things because it's what I've always known.
So we're talking about all these years. Things are really jumbled up here. I mean, between the children and the divorce and your drinking and you're staying at home with the kids, raising the kids, and then you're back at work, and the whole time you're still drinking.
Absolutely, yeah.
So the constant through all this really is the alcohol, isn't it?
Oh yes, alcohol was my friend from the time I was 15 years old.
You mentioned that your first husband liked to drink as well, but that he would reference to your drinking while you guys were having these fights or whatever else was going on. Did anybody else say anything to you about that? You mentioned your sister said something, but...
My sister, my father, when I was in college. Other than that, no, because we had all, the ones who were around it, my children were too little. The ones who were around it regularly at gatherings and things were my siblings. And they had been raised in the same dysfunctional household as me. And the way that we dealt with my mother's drinking and our brother's drug use was to pretend that it wasn't happening. And so I don't recall being confronted by any of them, and I don't fault them that, but it's just a fact.
So history kind of repeated itself, didn't it?
Yes, it did. I have asked my therapist how I prevent it from repeating itself for my children, and the only advice he has is to just continue to live a life in recovery. And that's the best thing I can do at this point.
So all of this is going on, and you're remarried, but you still haven't stopped drinking yet.
Oh, yeah. I went full steam ahead on the drinking. That's when I started drinking shots. So I had never really sat at a bar top before. I mean, I probably had a couple times in my life, but I really developed a taste for it after I met him, because that's where he liked to drink. And he would drink double shots of Jameson, and I tried to keep up, but I couldn't. And so that's when I switched to double shots of Tito's pretty much all day. Very not good for you, also very expensive.
You were working as an attorney at this point.
Correct.
It's a profession where there seems to be an awful lot of alcoholism. Why is that?
That's a great question. I've wondered that. Is it a profession that attracts alcoholics, or does it make people problem drinkers? I don't know. I really don't know. I'm an alcoholic not because I'm a lawyer. I would have been this anyway. That's what I can say about me.
Yeah.
It is deadline intensive and can be stressful, but.
Well, and sometimes you work very, very, very hard to a certain outcome, and the outcome just doesn't happen.
That's right.
It's almost like everything you've done, it just means nothing because you didn't win the case.
That's right. And you can tell the client, well, I worked really hard, but they don't care about that part. They care about winning.
Well, if you're already feeling bad about yourself and somebody else is feeling bad about you,
yeah.
that just makes things worse.
Yeah, and in the field that I'm in, litigation, I have to fight with other lawyers routinely. And so it's a little outside of my nature.
Yeah.
Some people like it. I don't like it, and so that causes stress as well.
So I met you, I think, on your very first meeting here at the club. Mm-hmm. You looked pretty rough at the time.
Everybody says that. I must have, because I hear that all the time.
It wasn't necessarily the way you were dressed or anything else. It just, you had that air of intensity that people have when they're desperate, but they're not really willing to admit it yet.
Yeah, I was in a bad way, that's for sure.
So what was happening in the final days leading up to that?
Well, so I mentioned that I had gone to rehab in 22.
Yeah.
I relapsed the day I got out, within like an hour.
Why is that?
Because something had not changed spiritually, and that's what had to change for me to make me stop drinking. I learned all about my disease. I participated in group. I was honest. I wrote gratitude lists. And when I left, I got home and my kids weren't there, and my husband hadn't got me flowers, and there wasn't a party and balloons and all these people waiting with bated breath to see me. And I felt my feelings were hurt. And I thought, I did all that, and I stayed in rehab even though I wanted to leave. And these people don't even care. My husband left and went to work. And so as soon as he left, I went straight to the liquor store.
So it was seemingly a non-event for everybody.
In my mind, yes.
Yeah.
But I see now that was a me problem.
When you were in rehab, were you going to any AA meetings?
They did. They took us meetings all around town. And I understood, reading those steps on the wall, that was going to mean a very intense spiritual and emotional overhaul. And I didn't want to have to do it that way. I just wanted to just not drink. And I did not want to have to go the AA route.
So something about seeing and knowing about AA while you're in recovery, but not believing that that's going to be your long-term solution, but whatever you learned, the facts and all the intellectual trappings of sobriety would be enough when you got out.
That's what I thought. I thought I could outsmart it.
Yeah. But within a day, you're back to it.
Yes. And within a few days, I was as bad as I was before I left.
So that happens. Did you call anybody before you picked up, or did you talk to any of the people from the recovery place, anything like that?
No way.
So you had no support system. You had no real handoff to AA, like somebody you met in the program is going to get together with you the minute you're out?
No. They wanted me to go to IOP. They wanted me to do all these things, and I said, I'm not doing that. They actually wanted me to live in a sober living.
You didn't really want to get sober, did you?
I did, but I wanted to do it an easy way.
Yeah.
I thought rehab was supposed to magically fix me.
Yeah, so rehab, I'm here at rehab, fix me.
Yeah.
And then you walk out and you realize that you're not fixed, but the reason you're not fixed is because you're not doing the work to be fixed.
That's right. And I will say, I would recommend the place that I went, but I wish that they had drilled AA a little harder, because I didn't fully understand that the problem was much deeper than just drinking.
Well, and that to me is always the weakest link in the chain. And I've said this for a long time, that handoff to AA after rehab or IOP or sober living, it's got to be a strong handoff, because otherwise the thought persists that I've learned enough and gained enough from this rehab experience or sober living experience or whatever else to keep me sober. Ergo, I don't need the intensity of a AA program just coming out.
Right.
And that's where I think a lot of people fall down. That's why I think you see a lot of people with multiple rehabs that they've gone through. There's something about that. I mean, as you thought about staying sober while you're sitting there in the rehab, you're halfway into, let's say, the month, or you're, that period of time, were you sitting there thinking, I'm going to probably stop for good, I probably won't drink anymore, or did you have that nagging suspicion that you would drink again?
I had a nagging suspicion that I would drink. Every night we had to write a fears list, and my one fear was relapse. I knew I had a reservation.
What did they tell you about that as you brought that up in group?
I can't remember, but they tried to intellectualize. I can remember them telling me, okay, when you have a craving for alcohol, envision yourself on a surfboard and you're surfing, and then the wave crests, and then the craving's gone. And I thought, oh, okay, well I don't know, maybe that'll work. I can tell you that didn't work. When the thought popped in my head, I can't get to the angel devil moment. If I get to the debate, it's over. I've lost. And so perhaps they said something that should have cured me. I can tell you if they did, I didn't hear it.
So you needed to get sober, you just didn't want to get sober.
I wanted to with all the earnestness in my heart, but I didn't want to do the kind of work that is required in AA.
So you're sitting in that first meeting. I remember you sitting there, and I don't overly do it, but I like to kind of check out the body posture and people's expressions. It seemed like the whole meeting, you were clenching your jaw, like there was something about this that was...
Well, I was in physical withdrawal.
You were?
I was, So when I came back, really I should have gone to detox probably.
So you detoxed on your own?
I did.
Wow.
Which is unsafe from what I understand. But yeah, I did it on my own.
That makes sense now as I think back to observing you.
It was hellish. It really was. But I can tell you, my last drunk, I was at my sister's house, and I was just miserable, and I was in complete bondage to this thing. It became clear to me that I was not going to beat it.
Mm-hmm.
And I prayed that God would either deliver me from this thing that had me, or that he would let me die. And I lived, obviously, and despite the fact that I was physically withdrawing from alcohol, the obsession to drink had been removed. And I can't explain that to you scientifically. I don't understand it.
It was as the result of that prayer?
Yes. When I came to on my sister's couch, minutes later, hours later, I don't know, it had been removed. And I'd been drinking. I was unsupervised at her house, drinking straight out of her bottles in her liquor cabinet. So I had access to alcohol. I could have easily gone and continued to drink. And I was able to not. And then I came here.
Were you still working at that time?
Yes.
So in the midst of all this, did you take off any time?
I took time to go to rehab once.
First time you took some time to do that. The second time you're coming over here on your lunch hour or whatever from work while you're detoxing to get what we had to offer.
Yes. I thought if I can get 1/16 of that peace that they seem to have, I'll do it. I'll do anything they tell me to do.
So you had already dismissed AA from your experience before as not the way to go. What was there about your experience now? Was it the desperation, or
Yes.
what made you look at what was going on around you and be okay with just everything and know that that's what you wanted?
It was the absolute beautiful gift of desperation and an understanding that I was going to die, if not from organ failure, from suicide, or even worse, in a car accident, which would undoubtedly harm somebody else, and that was intolerable to me. I had tried everything else, and something inside me knew that if something was going to work, it was going to be this. And it was kind of a Hail Mary. But I was willing to do almost anything. Now, I did not want to do step 4, and I told my sponsor that. And I said that there's certain people I'm not going to apologize to. I'll die an alcoholic death before I do that. But by the time I got there, I had changed my mind.
That's something.
Yeah.
If you work the steps, the next step that you work, you should be able to get through if you work the steps leading up to it.
Yes.
So obviously the first 3 steps were taken by the time you were ready to take the 4th step.
Yes.
You got a sponsor relatively early too, didn't you?
Yes. One of the women in the room grabbed her and said, "You should sponsor Jennifer." And I felt bad because I don't know that she necessarily wanted to, but I believe it was divine intervention.
Yeah.
It was exactly the sponsor I needed.
So she's been with you the whole time now.
Yes.
So tell me about the last couple of years with regard to working the steps and doing the additional things that we have to do on a daily basis to stay sober.
It's completely changed my life.
In what ways?
I was a pessimist when I got here, and now I'm an optimist.
That's a big shift too, isn't it?
That's everything. That's everything. As far as I'm concerned, it's changed everything. I have moments and spells of time where I'm not obsessed with myself, and that's such a relief. I can feel myself squarely in God's will when I'm thinking of somebody else or helping somebody else. I never thought that would be true. I just didn't understand how that could be true, and yet it is. Everything that I valued when I got here is no longer what I value at all. My concept of what I thought would make me happy has completely changed. I don't drink around the clock. I don't drink at all. I've gone to bars because I had to for work, and I've gone on airplanes and all these places that were my favorite places to drink that I never thought possible that I could walk in there and not just want to drink but take a drink. And it's like I'm completely neutral to it. It's the most astounding thing.
That's a real different feeling than you must have felt coming out of rehab the first time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I did not feel safe and protected when I left rehab. And I do now.
And AA makes you feel that way.
A connection with my higher power does.
I've been fortunate to attend a number of meetings with you over the past couple of years. I know I've seen the change. What kind of change have other people perceived in you?
I always want them to tell me more how nice I am and how different I am.
You are nice, just so you'll know.
Yeah, my kids aren't super verbal about it. I think that they're happy to have their mother and someone they can count on.
And how old are they now?
18, 16, and 15.
They're at that age where they're old enough to know what's going on, but maybe of the age that doesn't really care as that much about it.
Yeah, I would say that's probably accurate. They're very self-sufficient. But, my little one, I still pick up from basketball practice, and I don't think he worries at all that I'm going to forget to pick him up.
What a gift it is to them.
It's a gift. It should have been a given. I become frustrated with myself when I think about it, but thank God I got it when I got it.
Yeah.
I was able to have my daughter's, junior and senior year with her, that I was present. And other people haven't really told me that I'm different. I mean, my husband is glad that I don't drink and cuss him out the way I did. But I can feel the change on the inside, even if other people don't see it. It's there. My whole attitude has changed.
Well, sometimes people are a little bit, when they see a big change, they may not want to say too much about it for that feeling like maybe they'll jinx it. If I tell her how good she looks or how well she's doing, that somehow that might affect her negatively. But I'm a believer that people have to hear the positives. Just as we say to people, hey, I see you looking kind of sad about something. Would you like to talk about it? To say to them, and I don't think it happens as frequently when we say to somebody, you are looking really illuminated and bright today. What's going on that's making you, that's creating that? So as we kind of wrap this up, I wanted to ask you, how have the last 2 years been with regard to taking what you were so freely given and applying it to your program and your other relationships in the program?
Well, Are you asking me specifically about sponsorship?
Well, sponsorship, you can talk to me about sponsorship if you'd like, but it's any kind of service.
Yeah, so I haven't sponsored anybody yet, 100%.
Are you available?
Yeah, I'm available, and I try to be welcoming to newcomers without imposing myself on them.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you that I'm helpful to people around me when they ask with a loving heart, and whether they point it out or not, I can feel it. Like, I enjoy doing things for other people in a way that I never did before. And that comes from outside of me. I'm not taking credit for that. That comes from my higher power. I think my mission in life, in addition to being a mother, is to stay sober and to help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. So whatever I can do. I think about the fact that there was people here when I got here who had, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And I know they come back in part for their own sobriety, but they also come back because they want to help the newcomer, and they're charged with helping the newcomer. And I have such a debt of gratitude to them for being here, for this room not being empty when I showed up, and I am committed to doing that. Like, I can't pay you back probably, but I can pay the next person.
Yeah, like we pay it forward. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, absolutely.
As we close, I wanted to ask you a question that I ask a lot of people in the podcast, and that is, if you, Jennifer, with what you know now, with 2 years of continuous sobriety, 2 years of working a good program that is observable to other people like myself, knowing what you know now, if you could return to an earlier part in your life, to an earlier version of Jennifer, and sit down with her, what would you tell her? How old would she be, and then what would you tell her?
She would be 15, and I would tell her this thing that you're doing that you think makes you better and makes you more likable and makes you tolerate life. This thing is a demon, and it's going to get you. There's another way. And I would tell her that she's deserving of all sorts of good things. I don't know if it would help, but it's what I would say.
That's beautiful. Well, I've been enriched and invigorated by talking with you today. I knew that I liked what you said in meetings. I knew that you had an interesting story. But what I'm so grateful for is that you were willing to sit down with me today and allow me to then produce something. Somewhere, somehow, somebody's going to listen to it and be inspired by it. I can't tell you how many emails I've gotten from around the world, people saying, I was really feeling this way, and then I listened to the podcast, and it just picked me up in a way I hadn't expected.
I can tell you, I listened to your podcast in my early days, and it was helpful to me. It gave me hope. So,
yeah. And that's why I do it. And now you're the person who's transmitting that hope with 2 years. Has there been anything going on in this last 2 years? Any periods of time where you had your doubts, or where you felt like you were at a low point in your program or sobriety, that you were concerned about the future of it?
No, not yet. I've been trying to be the fastest swimmer because I know how serious this thing is that I have. And so I have low points when life happens where I can get a little edgy, but never have I felt that maybe I'm not going to make it. I've done what my sponsors told me to do, and I come to meetings.
Yeah.
And beyond that, I do. I seek God's will for my life. I try to do it very deliberately every day.
Yeah, and it's noticeable.
Yeah.
It is noticeable.
I'm glad to hear that.
I notice it over the last couple of years. Anytime people's names come up from time to time,
Sure.
with like who looks like they're really getting along well and who isn't. You've been in that group of people that, Jennifer, she's really come a long way. That's the scuttle behind the scenes, so you're in the right place.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. Thank you.
I want to thank you for doing this today. I love you. You're a really good person, and you've got a lot to offer the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And my hope for you in honoring your sobriety is that you carry on and give the same gift that you've been given to somebody else, or somebody's else, whoever they may be.
I love you, Howard. Thank you so much for finally letting me come on the show. I appreciate it.
Again, many thanks. Well, my friends, that's it for today's episode of AA Recovery Interviews. I want to thank my guest, Jennifer S., for sharing her story, and thank you for tuning in. If you've enjoyed the interviews in this podcast series, will you do a little service work by spreading the word about this rich and meaningful listening experience? This show is another helping hand of AA we can all extend to alcoholics everywhere. AA Recovery Interviews is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. Or visit our website, aarecoveryinterviews.com, where you can listen to every episode of AA Recovery Interviews. And if you want to contact me directly with any comments or suggestions, simply email howard@aarecoveryinterviews.com. Please also take a minute to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or YouTube Music. By the way, this podcast strictly adheres to AA's 12 traditions and all General Service Office guidelines for safeguarding anonymity online. I pay all production costs, and no one receives financial gain from the show. AA Recovery Interviews and my guests do not speak for or represent AA at large. This podcast is simply my way of giving back to AA that which has been so freely given to me. The next episode of AA Recovery Interviews is on the way, so keep coming back. It'll be here soon.